Welcome to TezTalks Radio. I'm your host, Marissa Trew, and I am joined by Anna Lucia, an engineer and a self-taught generative artist, and Gabrielle Maria Platt, the co-founder of Phoebe Hees, a high-tech fashion label based in Berlin. So welcome to you both. How are you each today?
Hi.
Good morning. I'm good.
Thanks for having us.
So this episode in particular is dedicated to learning a lot more about your recent collaboration, which was titled Spellbound, one of the first generative fashion collections especially launched on Tezos. And first, before we get into the details of the project, I want to hear your individual stories. So Anna, I'll start with you. Can you please share your journey into generative art and, what was it that intrigued you about this artistic genre in particular? And then how did you actually go about learning it as someone who is self-taught?
Yeah, sure. I think I want to start the story a little bit differently here today, that I don't usually get into too much in interviews that I do. But before becoming a generative artist, I've always been kind of like creative, making stuff, and that particularly involved actually making my own clothes, reworking clothes. I was very, very much into fashion as a teenager. So right after high school, I actually went to fashion school for a year. But I'm also like quite a mathematical minded person. Love kind of working with logic and all the sciences. So started out in fashion school, but after a year really realized like, ooh, that nagging feeling of wanting to still also do something more technical and scientific was really itching on me. So I actually went and studied engineering. But while doing engineering, there was like this nagging feeling, oh, where is this creativity? Where is the output to, where is the possibility for me to still create things? And that's really how I stumbled upon generative art about 5 years ago, where I was kind of like looking for something to do. And as you do as a nerd, you're like, let's just teach myself how to code, and let's do that in a creative way. Let's see, can we use code to create images? So that that's something that I stumbled upon 5 years ago. I didn't really know that much about generative art at that time. I didn't know that there was already a huge community online. This is pre NFTs existing, that there was this beautiful history of computer art. It's just something that I personally stumbled upon very organically and found that it really matched my way of thinking and the way that I love to express myself. Like for me, I see this really as drawing with code. It's a way for me to maybe a system, something that I have in my head that I'm thinking about, to be able to actually express that visually. And that medium of code just comes very natural to me. And as I was developing this, I went to social media, I started sharing my work, and I discovered this beautiful online community that was out there of other generative artists. And from one thing led to the other. NFTs came up. That was something that started to be brewing in the community, and people started talking about. I started experimenting with that 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and yeah, now we're here today.
So it sounds like you essentially found the perfect combination of your natural talent as it came to, logic, reason, code, and then just your desire, your hunger for a creative outlet or your ability to express it. And so those two married one another beautifully in the form of generative art. And I want to also ask, you've been working in this space and you've been a creator for quite some years. So what actually inspires your work? What are the motifs you tend to explore?
I think there's different things, but one of the major motifs that I kind of keep going back to, that is this idea of craft and textile works. So also definitely the project Spellbound is kind of just another expression of that, or going back into that interest. I've worked with looking at looms. I've looked at quilting. I've looked at embroidery, kind of like all these um, uh, textile crafts. And I think for me, this is a theme that I keep coming back to, because it's a theme that keeps being interesting to explore. It's something where, at the one hand, like technology is very apparent in textile and how to create textiles. Like the loom is the famous example of that. Yet at the same time, there is a femininity to that topic to that I like to bring into my work and like to express in kind of not a very overt way, but something that I am interested in exploring. At the same time, you're talking about craft, like, is this art or not? Which is also another question that you can ask about computer or art, or has been asked about computer art for a long time, and generative art, like, is it art or not? So there are so many things where I feel they kind of overlap each other, yet they're quite contrasting and very different mediums. Textiles are so extremely tactile and so extremely physical, whereas digital art is very, ephemeral, and all these kind of different themes and topics and how they overlay are very interesting to me. That's why I enjoy exploring it a lot.
So it sounds like Spellbound was, again, this perfect marriage of all of these different passions, these curiosities. And I love the notion of how you can sort of explore notions of femininity through textiles, but also technology, which I think many would consider notoriously masculine. So to be able to portray that through your work is very, very powerful. And then, Gabriel, I want to bring the conversation to you now, and to essentially ask more about Phoebe Hees. Am I pronouncing that correctly, by the way?
Actually, you're one of the few who got it right directly.
Wow, I I said it the first time and thought I should really check that. So that's a relief. Thanks. Okay. So Phoebe Hees, they've been at the forefront of high-tech fashion. What was it that attracted that as a brand towards the Web3 space and digital fashion in particular? And what was your personal journey into that world as well?
Hmm. So I have a marketing background. I used to be the head of digital for Vice magazine in Berlin for a while, and then I went into business consulting, innovation consulting, like digital innovation consulting to be exact. And then I met Phoebe, who is the co-founder together with me, and she's the designer, of course. And in those times, fashion brands were often called by the lead designers, as it is with Jules Sander and even Yves Saint Laurent and Tom Ford and so on. So that's where the name is coming from. And someone thought like her expertise, she was working for Adidas and designed for Stella McCartney at that time. And my expertise together would make an interesting fashion brand that is not existing yet, or did not exist at that moment, which is kind of like, you can imagine it as Q from James Bond, but for fashion. So we do all these crazy moonshot projects. We did the blackest t-shirt in the world. It's like Vanta black with like a 3-dimensional surface that acts like a photon trap. We have a black t-shirt that doesn't heat up under the sun, which is of course good for goths in the summer. Then we're working on a self-defense jacket for women right now. And so what we do is that we do very innovative stuff, and everything we do is sportswear oriented because of Phoebe's angle, and it's all very functional. And then Web3 came along, and I was immediately fascinated by it, because now we were able to put functions on functions and then another function on top of that. So it gets really, really interesting. And on the other hand, it's everything we do has of course a reason. Like from my end, I like I'm a very curious person. I just like to explore new ways, new innovative ways of doing things. Phoebe, from her design approach, she always likes to kind of empower women, to make them stronger, and I think you see that in the designs as well. And all that together is the brand as it is right now. And then I do consultant jobs as well for fashion tech, like the fashion tech subject. That's like the merge of technology and fashion, of course. I've been a mentor in Milano for a startup bootcamp where there's Prada and Gucci and Stone Island and so on, and we bring them together with interesting startups. So that's kind of the environment where the brand is at the moment.
So it sounds like one of the core or the main or the core ethos of Phoebe Hees is that innovation is at the very center of it all, but not at the expense of the wearability of the clothing. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So, well, as with a sportswear core, the stuff has to work, and bringing those two facets together is really the trick. So, yeah.
I think that's what's so interesting is because when people speak about, fashion tech or wearable tech, there's often this distinction between the coolness or the novelty of the idea and its practical usability. And also when we speak about, digital fashion, we speak about it as a separate universe to physical fashion. So again, we're starting to have these conversations about how all of these worlds are starting to converge, just as Anna was saying earlier about, throughout the course of her career and her education, how these elements started to piece together in a way that wasn't immediately apparent before. Which brings us to Spellbound, sorry. Can you guys talk me through, how you came across one another and essentially agreed to embark on this project together?
I guess it's quite a classic Web3 story because we met in the FX Hash Discord. So, where do people meet each other in this space? And I think Gabriel had put out a post in the Discord with this idea to do. What did the idea already said to do something with knitwear? I think, and FX Hash, and I saw that post. I was like,
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
intrigued. Yeah, I want to do something with knitwear and generative art.
So
No,
I
think
consult this project in Berlin. It's a microfactory that they're building, and the idea behind a microfactory really is to bring production back near shore. So instead of producing heaps of clothing somewhere in Asia and shipping that around the globe multiple times, and then not even knowing what's going to be trendy in 2 years, and therefore 80% is ending up in landfills or in the ocean or something. The idea is to produce that on demand, on location. And there is a large trend in Gen Z to do their clothing by themselves, which is very interesting. Like more than 50% of Gen Z said they would like to, or they're planning to produce their clothing by themselves next year. That was a survey by Instagram of all their platforms. So that was very interesting. But then, of course, you can't really personalize each item or design each item in a personalized fashion because that would just take too much time, to do it like with the large machines and so on. So that's really the sweet spot where generative fashion is coming in, because now you can have personalized backed by NFTs designs and turn them into fashion.
Yeah, and I think also when Gabriel and I started talking and he started telling me about this project, a lot of the things that he spoke about are things that really resonate with me in terms of fashion, even though it's something that I really enjoy. I'm not a big fan of the fast fashion. I'm very intentional about the clothes that I wear, where I buy it, and that is also a very core part of this project. I think what really drew me to working with Gabriel on this.
So there were shared values coupled with you being in the right place at the right time. And I love that it was a meet cute that happened on a Discord channel. It is a very classic Web3 way of doing things. But as you started to explore and conceptualize Spellbound, what were your actual intentions when you embarked on creating this collection together? What did you want the audience and collectors to feel when they received a piece of Spellbound?
Well, the initial idea about the project is really what was just a train of thought that I had that was, well, of course we can generate an artwork and then produce that. But wouldn't it be much cooler to use the possibilities of generative art and take a specific input that is more has a human angle, because generative art in itself is very technical. And yeah, that's where the idea came from, to use voice.
Yeah, and I think also something that was kind of like going back and forth in like our meetings and what we were talking about is this idea of like whenever you wear clothes, you're always expressing something, whether you're really like conscious about it or not. I mean, there's this absolutely famous scene in The Devil Wears Prada where she kind of completely analyzes this outfit where the woman thinks that she didn't think about the clothes that she was wearing and that it was sending a message, but it always is, you know, whether and we also wanted that to shine through in this project where but make it a lot more personal, you know, not necessarily like it was a trend from this thing or it was but have that personal message in the in what you're wearing. And I think something that I was thinking about while designing it and setting up the system, you can make, because it is a voice note and you can represent sound in a very obvious way of like, oh, this is all the data that is in the sound, and you can exactly see that. It's up it's hidden a little bit, like yes, it's there, it's apparent, you can kind of see it, but it's also not a very immediate direct thing. So, you know, your message is also still a little bit mysterious and private and for you. Yeah.
So what are the actual dynamics of the project? So if someone were to come in and collect a piece, what are they interacting with?
So we build it on the FX hash params backend. So FX hash has the possibility to set up a params project, and how it usually is, like as a generative artist, you choose like a few parameters that you can interact with in the system. So like, for example, in more traditional params project, that like an example would be like, oh, you can choose the color palette, or oh, you can choose that it is very minimal or very maximalist. However, in what we did in this project, that something that FX hash offers is you can actually kind of make a little bit more coded params. So actually, you have a little user interface where you can record a short voice note inside the token. You only see that inside the token during minting, that little user interface, and that recording is actually those become the parameters of your project. So that is what partially feeds the design of that scarf. So you are interacting with that in the params minting interface of FX hash. That's what we leverage to build this. And then once you mint your token, that user interface disappears, and it's really the token what remains. And then you are able to have your token, and you can use the redeems function, also leveraging FX hash to actually get your scarf sent to you, give the address it has to go to, etc.
I'm just very excited about what people will do with it. I mean, we thought about, it could be something like "I love you," or it could be a song someone is singing, or like a spell or something. But now all these other things are popping up already, like people saying what they want to do with it, and that's super interesting. I mean, like I had one idea was it could be like a cross-generational thing. Like somebody could give that through the generations with some kind of story embedded, or some kind of good wishes through generations. It could be some important speeches with global significance. It could be it could be just like the funniest Degen stuff anyone has said on CT by now, like can devs do something or whatever. So I'm really curious what people will come up with.
I think it's always fascinating when artists give so much creative control to the prospective collector themselves, because I mean, I guess to the uneducated or to the novice, the artist is essentially the director of the entirety of the piece or the entirety of the output. And then that sort of relinquished a little bit of control when we saw the rise of generative art and we understood the randomness that was sort of embedded within the code. And then to layer on top of that, you've also got the collector's interaction with the piece itself. So you've got so many dynamic elements that can ultimately manipulate the final output. And then to have it exist, you know, as a physical piece in its physical form, it opens up a whole new set of windows, because then you've got the styling decisions that come along with it. And I think it's this sort of really complex decision tree that you've unlocked through just the dynamics of Spellbound as a project. Were these all things that you sort of conceptualized ahead of time, or were these things that you kind of hoped for or were surprised by? How did you mentally conceive of this project before you sort of really started to see it come together?
I think there's one thing for me that comes to mind when you mention kind of the idea of also giving control to maybe the people getting the scarf for from my side as the artist. I was never that interested in doing a params project because there was this hesitation for me of like, it's okay for me to give that to randomness, but I don't want somebody to choose the palette. I don't want them to kind of like touch the algorithm almost in a way. If like, yeah, randomness can do that, but it was hard for me to relinquish that control. But I think that because it's done through voice, it still feels like quite ephemeral. You can't you're not really directing the buttons and figuring it all out. There's still kind of like a looseness to that, a bigger randomness almost that really attracted me in adding that layer on top of it. I don't know if there was, Gabriel, if there came anything up for you in the question.
No, I think
I
you put it.
hadn't thought about the styling decisions just that much yet, actually, that you mention it, like how they'll all look in the world.
Yeah, I guess with the generative art component, there is a controlled chaos to it, and it's parameters that you yourself set as an artist, but to give it to the user is to take your hands off in a way that is perhaps a very new feeling. So I can understand why it was causing a little bit of, I guess, dissonance in a way about how you wanted to interact with, or how you wanted people to interact with the piece. Because especially as Gabriel mentioned, someone could just be sending the most degen style voice note that just sort of discounts the ephemeral nature of the piece that you're trying to engineer. So I see why that was a potential conflict for you.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole project, the longer we do it, the more complex it gets. Like, not from a technical standpoint, but just like what's really possible with it, or what is important, or what different viewpoints you can have on the project. For example, like we always thought, there's the input, then there's the computation, and then there's the output. But from a social plastic kind of view, like what Beuys did, like how are people going to interact with the artwork? It's not only what they speak, it's then afterwards actually also what they do with the scarf. So for example, you meet someone, maybe now in Paris or something, and it's a conversation starter, and you talk about, well, that's what the scarf says. And so what would that discussion be like? Like, what would you like to talk about? Or actually, you could also say your seed phrase, but we're not listening.
I think that would be a very, very risque use of the Spellbound project. But I agree with you that it's the way I sort of visualize it in my mind is it's when you drop a pebble in a body of water and you watch the ripple effect. And there's a point at which you just can't measure the magnitude of the energy transfer as it expands outwards. You just have to sort of have faith that it continues ad infinitum. And I guess there is also a beauty, and there will be some ways that perhaps you don't like, but that's also a part of why this was all created, I guess. And as you said, you're starting with scarves. Is that sort of in this first iteration of the project, is that where it'll rest? Or do you foresee a future where you will start to experiment with other garments?
Well, I mean, the the idea or the seed for the project is planted now, and we can actually absolutely build that out. In the future, it is possible with those machines to produce other pieces as well. Like could be socks, could be hats, whatever. We'll see. But yeah, and maybe this will even become, I don't know, something where we then have the scarves interacting with something or so on. I mean, there are so many things we can do in the future, and I'm already looking forward to think about that.
And so, as we're recording this, it's a day prior to the launch of the collection. And hopefully we'll have this episode out quickly enough that people will be able to understand all of the thought behind what this collection represents. But with the initial run up, the teasers and just the general early conversations that are being had between the Tezos community and the FX Hash community, how have people responded to these early previews? Has there been an overwhelming response, or has it been sort of this gentle curiosity? What do you feel the response was?
I've been personally very excited about the response of people, how people have responded to it. I think probably this happens more often, but we've been already working on this project for months. So kind of for me, the novelty of it had worn off, like now kind of like starting to show to the world and tell people about it, and to just get that feedback a bit again. People like, wow, this is really cool, like how you leverage these tools that are already there, like params has already been there for a while, redeemables on FX Hash has already been there, but have been able to and also these kind of like this knitting machine or the was already there, and how we've been able to just kind of like put all these things together to bring something new. I think people have responded very positively to it.
Yeah, I mean, we do have different audiences, I think, Anna and us. And from the fashion crowd, they really, really like it. There has been very interesting articles around that subject. There has not been many projects into that direction. So people from the Web3 fashion part totally understand it and are very much behind it. And interestingly, as Anna said, we've done this for some month now, developed this for some month now, and we had an event in Berlin, which was actually like Web2 fashion people. I mean, well, not even Web2. Some of those designers don't even own a laptop, but they were at this event, and they were all really, really fascinated by it. Like usually, it's rather hard to fascinate or get someone interested who doesn't have a clue about Web3. But those people, they loved it directly just because of, the very emotional aspect of it.
When I was doing a lot of preliminary research ahead of this interview, I wanted to understand the generative art fashion landscape. But I think a lot of the discourse surrounding generative AI sort of polluted that water, and a lot of people seem to conflate the two concepts together, which meant that I think it was almost harder for generative art to really break through that noise. But I think a project like this is one of those cases where it is such a clear demonstration of this combined power of creativity, code, and physical output. And it sort of begs questions towards, the future of fashion tech. As I alluded to earlier, there have been a lot of these conversations around the idea of digital or phygital fashion. Everyone's obsessed with this idea of wearables. If you think about things like the Apple Vision Pro, augmented reality accessories, everything's about how do we blur the physical and the online. Yeah. And then here we have this instance of taking a digital art concept and then making it physical, So it's against the usual direction, and that where we're digitizing, like where we're usually digitizing the physical thing, and instead we're, I don't even know, physicalizing the digital thing. It reverses that relationship that we're used to. So what do you make of that relationship? Should it have always been this two-way street, or is it about time that we saw it come the other way?
I'm personally very excited about reversing it the other way. And I think in the recent year, we've seen more projects kind of going into that direction, not only in terms of fashion, but we've seen chairs, we've seen rugs, we've seen stained glass, we've seen quite a lot of projects going into that direction. And I think in the end, the tangibility of things is still something that really excites me personally, to be able to have something in your hands, even though I'm also a big fan of art on screens. I think especially with something like fashion, for me, the really like digital fashion, like like the example that you give, like with augmented reality and things like that. To me, it hasn't clicked that much personally uh to um to see that and to go beyond, like, oh, that's really cool, that's a really cool way to leverage a certain kind of technology, and designs are often like incredible and amazing because you can do all these cool stuff in like the digital world. So I but to go beyond that hasn't clicked for me personally, whereas the other way around, it does a lot more. And also where Gabriel thinks mentioned earlier, this idea of like some to create something generational, often the physical is longer lasting. You know, the for a scarf, we're not going to live in a world 10 years from now like, oh, that doesn't work on my device anymore, or I need to update the app to work this anymore. No, that scarf will still be there. So I think also almost thinking about that, and then also thinking about the sustainability in fashion, that um, things can last also longer sometimes in the physical world. I don't know. How do you think about that, Gabriel?
Well, I think both things has their right to exist. Um,
Mm,
for that project, for me personally, I mean, that's a very fun project, cool project. We can really show what is possible. But I mean, if we really are able to start a change in the way fashion is being produced,
mm,
and if that's just, I don't know, going to be like I don't know, 1% market or something in the future, like personalized nearshore production, then we're relieving the planet of, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of tons of trash,
mm.
of plastic trash. So that's really a worthwhile reason to do this. On the other hand, of
Yeah.
course, when you have digital fashion just by itself, it actually has a similar trajectory in a way that if we pour, I mean, if you look at fashion like as it used to be, like in the very old times, the only function of fashion was to shield you from the elements. But then there were all these other functions coming on top. You wanted to look, I don't know, you wanted to look pretty, you wanted to look rich, you wanted to look belonging to a specific tribe or something. And if we are with digital fashion able to port all these functions into Web3, instead of having to produce all of the
Mm,
stuff with all these functions, then this is a big relief for the planet as well.
mhm. Yeah, and I think also what you're in a way saying, that the two things don't bite each other. In a way, you have like the digital realm that is completely limitless, and you can make amazing things there, but at the same time you're still gonna, go out onto the street and you want to keep yourself warm. So um uh you might need a scarf, like. So I think also both directions can really coexist with each other.
And as we said, this is a very early foray into this dual relationship, and there's so much territory to explore. So, what comes next? What other technologies are you each experimenting with that you either want to infuse within your art or within the fashion itself. And I guess in the bigger picture, where, like Gabriel, this question is for you. Where do you see fashion tech going next? We've seen so many major fashion brands enter this digital fashion realm, and there's still so much experimentation and tinkering and like trying to find their collective identities within these new environments. But then new trends will come. The metaverse is becoming an even more imminent reality. Spatial computing is completely changing the way we interact with one another. So how does this all come together for Anna, to influence your work, and for Gabriel to influence fashion?
Yeah, I can go first on this question. For me personally, something that I am exploring at the moment is embroidery, and not necessarily embroidery done by hand, but embroidery done with an embroidery machine. I had a first project where I showed that last year in December in Miami at the Untitled Art Fair. And I think for me, this has really unlocked something and is a medium that I want to explore a lot more. Like I'm kind of like writing the software that creates these embroidery patterns myself, and I'm very excited to see where that's going to lead me and experiment a lot more with that. Also, something that is applicable to fashion in a way. I've done some small things where I had like a shirt that had a stain on it, so I didn't wear it anymore, and I've like embroidered stuff on top of it. But these are just kind of like small things here and there. But who knows what it will, where that will run into in the future.
So plenty more experimentation to come. And in this era of experimentation, what do you think is next for the world of fashion tech?
Well, I can. There is many things are happening in that area simultaneously. I can maybe give a little bit of an outlook how the trajectory of this a microfactory thing is going to be, and that is when you extrapolate from what happened to the internet. You used to have the first network somewhere in universities in the US. Then it came to businesses first, and then it came to all these internet cafes which were around your corner, and only then it came home to you. So what I think will happen there is that we will have clusters of production centers in cities where you can just have your digital and like NFT based artworks made around the corner, and then eventually the goal is to have a replicator at your home, just as they do in the Star Trek.
So we'll almost see this micro production come into our homes. So we'll all be fashion designers and creators and manufacture our own clothes, hopefully in a much more sustainable way than we are currently seeing with, fast fashion, mass production, global scale, in a way that's just done more damage than benefited us. And then my final question is, for anyone who's curious to learn more about the Spellbound project, where can they go to find more information, and what are any tips that you'd like to offer them as they begin to interact with your work?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to find the project is to go to FXHash. Right now, it should be quite at the top of the incoming projects, called Spellbound. You can also find it, or through Phoebe Hees or my FXHash account. Most information about the project is there. I really just invite people to open up the params and really start experimenting with it, try different things, maybe try even saying nothing, or try, being very loud, try music, words, your kid's voice, your best friend's recordings. Really just do whatever. Maybe try to zoom in. There might be something cute and hidden there if you do that. Yeah, have fun.
Wonderful. And Gabriel, any final words?
Well, it's I really like the art of Anna, because when you speak or if you say something, if you have a whatever source of sound, you can. It's really fun to look into the sign and see, like, a little bit, try to find out and see when was I louder, when was I more silent, when was I faster, and see how that really is being translated in the artworks. Other than that, if you have any questions, you can also just DM us too as well. We are on Twitter and on Warpcast.
Yes, we are on WordPress at the moment. Yeah, and maybe some just practical things. The project opens tomorrow on the 20th of February, or might already be open when this comes out, and it's a complete open edition, and then it closes on the 1st of March. When you purchased your token, this includes all the production costs, already includes all the shipping costs, so that's all comes with your token. Then you can redeem your token. That will be possible for like 2-3 weeks after the closure of the project, and we will get your scarf to you as fast as possible after that.
Oh, and it's actually made of course, this is a sustainability project by itself. So the scarf is being made of 100% sustainable merino wool.
Anna, Gabriel, thank you so much for your insights. It's truly a fascinating project, and I'm sure that edition is going to just keep going and going and going, that I think people are going to be panicking about the close date coming in so soon. So best of luck with its launch. I'd love to see some of the output that's generated. And until we speak again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.